Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. As-salatu wa-salamu ala Sayyidil Anbiya wal Mursaleen. Allahumma a'limna ma yanfa'una wanfa'na bima tu'allimuna wa zidna bi fadlika 'ilman wa ta'liman innaka ala kulli shay'in qadir. So, um, I know some of you are very familiar with this topic. We just did a previous book in Usul al-Fiqh, and um, and you already have an idea. We've discussed a lot of things. Give me a second, please. Some of you have not, and this might be the first time doing usul. Some of you, mashallah, are versed in different madhahib, you've studied lots of different things, some of you have not. So, particularly those people who are new, Mizan and Danielle, if you can just, whenever I say something random, you like, stop, please hold your horses. I don't understand what's going on because I know everybody else, and I know that all, Enrico is a part-time mujtahid imam. Muhammad Amin is the mujtahid of the era, the mujaddid of the Hanabila of the 21st century. So, some of these guys, mashallah, they have a, they have a background. I don't know what everybody's background is, so just stop me when things are not clear, inshallah. Okay, number one. Number two, this class is very different to the previous one. So the previous one was more bahthi, discussions, looking at different things. This is more of a darsi class, meaning uh, this book is like a classic text from Zaytuna in Tunisia, um, and um, um, it's a classic text, and they used to talk in the madrasa as what we call a class that's darsi or dirasi, right? You kind of like it's there as part of core curriculum. It's not there to be. It's not. We're not really discussing a lot. We're more just like reading the text and making sure we do fiqh al-ibara and make sure we understand what's going on. Okay. The third point then is something that we've already spoken about anyway in the previous class, but the idea of what is usul. The usul is your major premise for every dalil, right? So we have a major, whenever you're making any argument, right? You're making a major, every single argument has a major and minor premise, right? The major premise is the big picture, the minor premise is the specific picture. So whenever we talk about a dalil, you say, what's your dalil? You're going to have a dalil ijmali combined with a dalil tafsili, and then you're going to get your conclusion, right? This is halal, this is haram, this is makruh, this is that, right? Um, so you have to have these two things. So any dalil that is not conjoined with the dalil with a what's called a dalil ijmali without your major premise is not a dalil, right? It's not a dalil, right? Um, So when I say, for example, why do I have to pray? And say, oh, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Aqim salah, right? The dalil, the major premise is whatever Allah tells you to do, you have to do. The minor premise is Allah has told you to pray. Conclusion, you have to pray, right? Major premise, a Sahih hadith only conveys dhan, only makes you confident, it's not yaqeen, right? Major premise, al-amal ahl Medina, yufid al-dhan, right? A major premise that what the inveterate practice of Medina gives us dhan, right? Major premise that amal Medina yuqaddam ala khabr ahad, right? That what the inveterate practice of Medina is given precedence over something else, over hadith that are not corroborated by other evidence. Right? So these are our major premises that we might use, right? Another premise, al khabr ahad yuqaddam ala amal Medina, right? Right. Al-Hadith al-Mursal is a dalil, is not a dalil, right? So these are all your major premises under which you put your minor premise and you get your conclusion. Without usul, there's no dalil, right? Without usul, there's no dalil. So whenever you're talking to somebody who says the dalil is this, what's your major premise in your argument? They're like, what do you mean? So, well, you're making a statement, you have a major premise and a minor premise. What's your major premise? Right? Um, that's how you have an argument. A major premise, minor premise, conclusion. Right? القضية الكبرى, القضية الصغرى, right? Then you got your conclusion. Make sense, guys?
Yes.
Okay. Then, so who was our Sharh? So the Sharh is al-Hattab, so late Maliki. So anybody who's late, we're gonna see this. He's a late book. He's late. He's can be representing a nice mature study book, like a bit like the Azhariya, right? In the Azhariya, it's a late study book, right? It is not something like the book we did before, which was kind of like discussions and very, very, very early and not so mature um, textbook. Okay, so Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So he says Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi sallam. قال الشيخ العالم العلامة الحبر or الحبر, you can say both. الفهامة مفتي المسلمين ببدل الله الأمين أبو عبد الله محمد بن سيدنا ومولانا الشيخ العلامة المعروف بمحمد الحطاب نفع الله به آمين. مقدمة الشارح. Right? Would anybody like to read? No? Okay, no worries. Okay, khair. So he says, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salam ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in wa ba'du. فإن كتاب الورقات في علم الأصول الفقه للشيخ الإمام العلامة صاحب التصانيف المفيدة أبي المعالي عبد الملك إمام الحرمين كتاب صغر حجمه وكثر علمه وعظم نفعه وظهرت barakatuhu. Right? So in reality, this book is not really known if Imam al-Haramain actually wrote this book or not. Right? This book is a bit like al-Ajurumiyya. Like it's just a text that everybody uses and everybody's referred to, and it's really great. Right? But whether or not he wrote it or not, we don't really know, and it doesn't really matter. Right? It's basically simple enough for everybody to use as a textbook. Right? So textbooks are tools to get to things. Right? So what is knowledge then? If we look at knowledge, Imam al-Bajuri, he breaks it down to 3 levels. He says, you got level 1 of knowledge is tasawwur al-masail al-basita, right? So you talk about usul al-fiqh, you talk about tajweed, you talk about fiqh, you talk about hadith, and you say, do you have tasawwur of the masail, bi shaklin basit? Do you have a general idea in your head about what are these discussions are? So we're talking about A, B, C, D, da, 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 da. Explain each one. What are we talking about? Okay, I've got it. Number 2 is now tasawwur al-masail al-sa'ba. So now you're talking about difficult scenarios, right? You're talking about difficult scenarios. So you've got your risala level, you've got your Khalil level, you've got your Matan al-Shuja' level, you've got your Minhaj al-Talibin level, right? Whatever it is in Dalil al-Talib level, and you've got your whatever level else in Hanbali fiqh, right? You've got your basic scenarios and then complex scenarios. So do you have the tasawwur of the masail on a basic level, tasawwur of the masail on a higher level, and then iqamat al-hujjah. Then you make the argument. So when you're studying a late book, as long as it's doing the job, like it gives you tasawwur of the masail, right, then you're fine, right? In fiqh, it's nice to have something that's mu'tamad, obviously, because it kind of makes it much harder. But essentially, that's not needed, right? So, like, for example, look at Risala in Shafi in Maliki fiqh, right? The Risala does the job. It's not always the mashhur of the school, but it doesn't matter. It does the job, right? So the point is you're trying to get tasawwur al-masail, right? So here's a book that's simple enough as long as it's organized in a way that helps you get tasawwur al-masail. It's organized things in a certain way. It doesn't matter who wrote it and who didn't write it. It's not the end. It's not an ad hominem argument that he wrote it, so therefore it's true. He didn't write it, therefore it's not true. So it doesn't really matter. He says, وقد شرحه جماعة من العلماء رضي الله عنهم فمنهم من بسط الكلام عليه ومنهم من اختصر عليه. Right? So in reality, like the commentaries and whatever, this is just again a kind of like an elementary slash intermediate level text. It doesn't matter who wrote it, who didn't write it, how good these books are. They are not really a proof in and of themselves. When you get to other works like Jami' al-Jawami', like the Minhaj al-Baydawi, like Mukhtasar ibn Hajib, right? These books allow, now we're talking about real training and real maraja', right? Like, oh wow, that's really important. Whereas here it doesn't really matter. It's just getting the idea, right? ومن أحسن شروحه شرح شيخ شيوخنا العلامة المفيد جلال الدين أبي عبد الله محمد بن أحمد المحلي الشافعي فإنه كثير الفوائد والنكت اشتغل به الطلبة وانتفعوا به إلا أنه لفرط الإيجاز قارب أن يكون من جملة الألغاز فلا يهتدى لفوائده إلا بتعب وعناية. Right? So Imam Mahalli, right, he wrote many texts and many study works, like his commentary on his tafsir, right? Tafsir Jalalain, so that's Jalaluddin al-Mahalli and Jalaluddin al-Suyuti, right? Jalalain, similar kind of thing, extremely terse, hard to unpack. What did he else write? He wrote commentary on the Waraqat. He wrote Kanz al-Raghibin, right? Kanz al-Raghibin, which is a Sharh al-Minhaj al-Talibin, same kind of idea, right? It is a good study text, right? To kind of to kind of see what's going on in the ulum. He has other works as well. So he's late, Jalaluddin al-Mahalli, he's late, reliable, etc. Just giving the upshot of the Shafi school. He says, وقد ضعفت الهمم في هذا الزمان وكثرت فيه الهموم والأحزان وقل فيه المساعد من الإخوان فاستخرت الله تعالى في شرح ورقات بعبارة واضحة منبهة منبهة. So the عبارة does تنبيه, not منبهة. Not sure why it'd be منبهة, but وبعبارة هي تنبه على نكت الشرح المذكور وفوائده بحيث يكون هذا الشرح شرحا للورقات وللشرح المذكور ويحصل بذلك الانتفاع للمبتدئ وغيره إن شاء الله ولا أعدل عن عبارة الشرح المذكور إلا لتغييرها بأوضح منها أو لزيادة فائدة وسميته قرة العين لشرح ورقات الإمام الحرمين والله سبحانه المسؤول في بلوغ المأمول وهو حسبي ونعم الوكيل. Make sense inshallah? Then he goes into Imam al-Haramain. So Imam al-Haramain, we don't need to go through this whole thing. Upshot is he is not late, not early, but middle Ash'ari, right? Key Shafi'i. So he's in this middle stage of the Shafi'i school, middle stage of Ash'ariism. And he says وانتهت إليه رئاسة علم نيسابور وبنيت له المدرسة النظامية. Right, so basically he was kind of like he was the the provost of this university basically, right? And so his books and his style of teaching and Ash'ariism and Shafi'ism became this major thing. Okay, Bismillah. So he says قال مصنف رحمه الله بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وكذا ينبغي أن يجعل okay, we're not going to do all of this. Let's skip this. So he says هذه بالإشارة هذه إلى والإشارة بهذه إلى حاضر في الخارج إن كان أتى بها بعد التصنيف وإلا فهي إشارة إلى ما هو حاضر في الذهن. So he says this or these are a few pages, meaning these pages in front of you or this thing in your mind. It says وهذه الأوراق تشتمل على معرفة فصول جمع فصل وهو اسم لطائفة من المسائل تشترك في حكم وتلك الفصول من علم أصول الفقه ينتفع به المبتدئ وغيره. So he says تعريف أصول الفقه. He says ذلك أي لفظ الأصول الفقه له معنيان. أحدهما المعناه الإضافي وهو ما يفهم من مفرديه عند تقييد الأصل بإضافته للثاني. So أصول الفقه, the roots, origins, bases of fiqh, right? That's called al-ma'nahu al-idafi. These two words, etc. Right? Now what we're going to do is we're going to fuse these two words. Right? So if I say psychology, okay, psycho, psych, the soul, psyche, ology, talking about the soul. Okay, so I'm talking about the soul, that's called psychology, right? So Muhammad and I, we sit down and start talking about the soul, that's called psychology. Biology, right? Christology. I'm talking to a Christian about Christ. That's called Christology, right? So that's معناه الإضافي. Right? That's معناه الإضافي. Take the words apart. That's what it means. وثانيهما معناه اللقبي. What do you mean as a term? Christology is not two people talking about Christ. Alayhi salam. Christology is a subsection of Christian theology where they talk about the nature of Jesus alayhi salam. That's called Christology. Right? So you wouldn't say Farid is a Christologist because he spoke to his Christian friend about whether it's the nature of Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam. Christologist is somebody who's a specialist in that field of philosophy, right, or theology, right? You don't somebody could say he's a psychologist, somebody who spoke about, right, somebody who spoke about the soul. Psychologist, somebody gets involved in, the whole science, right? That's cool. So that's ma'nahu al-laqabi. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So guys, remember, everybody please stop me if I'm saying something that doesn't make sense. وهو العلم الذي جعل هذا التركيب الإضافي لقبا له ونقل عن معناه الأصل الأول إليه. وهذا المعنى الثاني ذكر المصنف بعد هذا في قوله وأصول الفقه طرقه على سبيل الإجمال. How to do fiqh in terms of major premises, not in terms of minor premises. I'm not talking about whether your wudu is broken if this or that. We're talking about the major premises that we combine with the minor premises to do fiqh. والمعنى الأول هو الذي بينه بقوله مؤلف من جزئين من التأليف وهو حصول الألفة والتناسب بين الجزئين فهو أخص من تركيب الذي هو ضم كلمة إلى أخرى وقيل إنها بمعنى واحد. وقوله مفردين من الإفراد المقابل التركيب للمقابل التثنية أو الجمع, right? What he means, right? فإن الإفراد يطلق في مقابلة كل منهما, right? So when he says المفردين, he doesn't mean singular words. He means singular units, right? Like مؤمنون, مسلماني, كتاب. These are all mufrads, as opposed to Abdullahi, that's a murakkab, right? جاء زيد, that's a murakkab, right? So two words that come together to mean something, that's called a murakkab. Mufrad meaning just a word by itself. Okay. He says فالأصل ما بني عليه غيره أي فالأصل الذي هو مفرد الجزء الأول ما بني عليه غيره كأصل الجدار أي أساسه وأصل الشجرة أي طرفها الثابت في الأرض وهو أقرب تعريف الأصل فإن الحس يشهد له كما في أصل الجدار والشجرة, right? The roots of a tree. فأصول الفقه أدلته التي يبنى عليها, right? The major premises that you can join with the minor premises to get your conclusions. وهذا أحسن من قولهم الأصل هو المحتاج إليه فإن الشجرة محتاج إلى الثمرة من حيث كمالها وليست الثمرة أصلا للشجرة. ومن قولهم الأصل ما منه الشيء فإن الواحد من العشرة وليست العشرة أصلا له. ولما عرف الأصل عرف مقابله وهو الفرع على سبيل الاستطراد فقال والفرع ما يبنى على غيره, right? So we're talking about furu', we're talking about conclusions, right? As opposed to major premises, right? So we have now our adilla al-ijmaliyya, that's our major premises. Our adilla tafsiliyya, that's our specific hadith to do with this topic, specific verse of the Quran, specific type of analogy, whatever it is. And then we have our furu', which are the conclusions. So dalil ijmali, dalil tafsili, and fara', which is the hukum shar'i. Make sense?
Yes.
اوكي تعريف الفقه والفقه الذي هو الجزء الثاني أصول الفقه له معنى لغوي وهو فهم ومعنى شرعي وهو معرفة أحكام الشرعية التي طريقها الاجتهاد. So this is the definition that they're using here, right? It is knowing the rulings that are shari'iyah that are known through ijtihad, right? So this is a super important definition because people come along and they think, because they don't know what's going on, they think they're not doing ijtihad. They think they're just extracting ilm, right? So, you know, we all know that Sahih Muslim is true. In Sahih Muslim, it says the Prophet forbade selling cats. It is haram to sell cats. Khalas. That's not ijtihad. That's not ijtihad because it's just qat'i, right? Like, we all know the Sahih Muslim is true. We all know the hadith in Sahih Muslim are all sahih. And the Prophet forbade selling cats. Khalas. It's haram to sell cats. That's not ijtihad, right? Right? Ijtihad is, for example, can I sell bitcoins, right? So the issue in his mind is he doesn't know what fiqh is because he doesn't actually see the difficulties or the problem. He just like went through things really simply, right? Like I remember my mum, I used to do karate, right? And so my mum, she was like, can you do this trick where like you lie on your back and like jump straight from your back onto your feet? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So she was like, and I was like, no. It's like, well, what? She's like, why can't you do that? I was like, Mama, that's really hard, right? Like to lie on your back and jump up in the air and like land on your feet, like straight from your back. And she's like, how's that hard? You know? It's like you see it on kung fu films, like what are you doing in karate class, you know? Like, so here's somebody who doesn't do that, doesn't get involved in the activity. They just see things as trivially easy, right? This is so easy. Like, where's the difficulty there, right? It's not even a difficulty, right? You know, or like, how do you knock somebody out? Just punch them in the face, right? Is it easy to knock somebody out by punching them in the face? Is that an easy thing to
It's
do?
not.
Right? I know Enrico, you used to be MMA guy, right? So is that easy? Like you just like punch somebody in the face and they just knock them out, like that's just like that.
No, it's not. It's not.
It's very difficult, right? It's very difficult. So somebody looks watches TV like, yeah, it's easy, just knock them out like that, boom, like you know, you can just do it to anybody. So it's pretty actually hard. So they don't see it as ijtihad. So what do we have? The issue is, did the Prophet actually say that? Did he mean what I thought he meant? What is the other evidence that goes against it? That's actually a really difficult process. It's really complex. But because they simplify things and they're blind to the errors, they don't see it as ijtihad, right? They don't see that as ijtihad, right? So what he's saying is there's fiqh, there's extrapolating halal haram, which does not require any ijtihad, right? It's just obvious, right? And there's extrapolating halal haram, which requires ijtihad. When the Prophet ﷺ forbade selling cats, did he do that? Is it abrogated? When he forbade selling cats, what did he mean by that? Right? So what does that actually mean? So there's these different things, right? So معرفة الأحكام الشرعية التي طريقها الاجتهاد, i.e. we're dealing with what? أدلة إجمالية ظنية. Our usul principles are all dhanni and not qat'i. It is not necessarily true that Sahih Hadith yufid al-dhann. It is not necessarily true that al-amal al-Madina la yufid al-dhann. It is not necessarily true that Mursal Hadith is weak and therefore la yufid al-dhann. That's not necessarily true, right? So our settings, our adilla al-ijmaliyah, the settings that we're going to use to put into our conclusions are all adilla ijmaliyah dhanniya, okay? Then our adilla at-tafsila are right? When we use a Sahih Hadith, we don't know the Prophet said it, we think he said it, when we say the Prophet ﷺ forbade selling cats, he may not have actually forbade selling cats. He may have been talking about something else, right? Right? And so our what we are doing, the whole process, and the natija is dhanniya, right? So fiqh is dhanni then, right? So fiqh is dhanni. So the question then comes is how do you call it ma'rifah or how do we call it ilm? Right? معرفة الأحكام الشرعية التي طريقها الاجتهاد. Right? Shouldn't we call it ظن الأحكام الشرعية التي طريق الاجتهاد? Given that our adilla al-ajmaliyya are dhanniya, most of them, and our adilla al-tafsiliyya, the actual specific things that we're using, they're dhanniya, and the conclusion is dhanni. So the hukm is dhanni. Right? We say we think this is halal and we think this is haram and we think this breaks wudu and we think this contract's not doesn't count and we think you have this right and we think that, etc. So shouldn't we call it a dhann al-ahkam al-shar'iyya?
There are two types of knowledge, and I think that the type of knowledge referring to fiqh is ilm nadari, right? Because you looked into the
Okay,
matter, and then
so 1 second here, 1 second, Enrico. So Abdul Jalil, right? This is Abdul Jalil?
yes,
Yeah, so Abdul Jalil, when you say ilm nadari, okay, nadari does not mean dhanni, okay? They're not the same thing.
yes,
Okay, so what is nadari is like what is 3 to the power of 4. So 3 times 3 times 3 times 3. So 9, 27, 81. Is that right?
Yes.
yes,
So that's ilm nadari, meaning تطلب النظر, right? As opposed to ضروري, I say 1 plus 1 equals 2. That doesn't take any nazar. Okay, so نظري يتطلب النظر, ضروري لا يتطلب النظر, right? As opposed to ظني, it might not be right. As opposed to قطعي, it has to be right. Okay, so can you repeat your question, Abdul Jalil?
I thought that we call it ilm because yeah, okay, that doesn't make sense if you put it that way. Yes.
Okay, so here, go ahead, Mizan.
Can we say that because it's Golibat is on is close to Yaqeen?
Okay, good. So the
Because
argument of many scholars, is because basically you've done so much research, you spent your whole life doing this, that the shukuk in your mind have now disappeared. And so for the mujtahid who now says witr is obligatory or witr is not obligatory, it is dhannun, dhannun qawiyyun jiddan, right? قد قارب العلم وقارب المعرفة. Okay, so that's one opinion. The second opinion, which is put forth by Imam Baydawi in his Minhaj, is he says, no, Habibi, it is ilm. Okay, how is it ilm? So I say, Mizan, do you know that you're a mujtahid? Say, yes, I know I'm a mujtahid. Mizan, do you know that the mujtahid has to act upon his dhan? Say, yes. Okay, so now Mizan has gone and done ijtihad and looked at every single dalil possible and impossible and researched inside and back to front, has come to the conclusion that witr is obligatory. So now I come up to him and say, is witr obligatory? He says, yes. He says, do I know that? I say yes. And from the point of view of knowing that I'm obliged to pray witr and that I'm obliged to give fatwa that it's obligatory, it is ilm. I know that's the case. As for whether it is actually the case, in reality, that's something else. But in terms of, I know that I have to give this fatwa and I know that I have to pray it, it is knowledge. Just like the doctor knows that there's 2 possible ways to operate on this patient, A or B. B is far-fetched, A is more likely. So I have to do A. The doctor knows that. And if the doctor doesn't do that, we can sue him and he's immoral and he's going to be punished in Judgment Day. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Right? You were looking for your lost child. They could have gone right, they could have gone left, and you said it's very unlikely they went left. but then you went that direction anyway. That's stupid. That's irresponsible. Why'd you do that? Right? So so the point is أعلم أنه يجب علي أن أعمل بالظن وأعلم أني أظن وجوب الوتر نتيجة يجب علي الوتر or يجب علي أن أفتي بوجوب الوتر, right? These are two separate things. You come and ask me, I have to give that fatwa. Can't give any other fatwa. So whether or not, so Imam Baydawi says, إنما الظن في الطريق, right? It being probabilistic is just in the way. It's just in the way. But at the end of the day, it is actually ilm, right? The mujtahid does actually know something. Okay? Does that make sense?
Wouldn't we have to define the fiqh twice, once for the mujtahid and once for the
Yes, but
muqallid?
in reality, fiqh is only that of the mujtahid.
Hmm.
So basically, everybody else is not really doing fiqh, right? And so, yeah, so everybody else is just looking at what's going on and kind of appreciating what's going on, right? So as we go through these three levels we mentioned from Bajuri, right? تصور المسائل البسيطة, تصور المسائل الصعبة, and then إقامة الحجة, right? You are going through these levels of kind of appreciating more and more what's going on, right? So again, for example, Abdul Jalil, our MMA fighter, right? He's being trained, right? He's being trained in his grappling. He's being trained in boxing. He's being trained in kickboxing. He's being trained in different kind of things. He's being trained in, for example, breathing techniques. He's being trained in these things. As he's going through this training, he doesn't really understand what it means to be punched in the head that hard, right? Like, what does it mean to be hit that hard, and how are you going to focus? Why he had to learn how to do a roundhouse, like that kind of hook. He had to do it this particular way and do it 10,000 times. He doesn't really understand. Now he's been in MMA for 10 years and he comes back. He's like, yeah, totally understand it. It's now no longer taqleed. I am not learning why I trained in this way. I understand why I trained in this way. And in fact, I have my own approach. So now he's a mujtahid. But in the beginning, as you're learning how to appreciate things, this is not jahl, and it's not pure taqleed, but it has levels of taqleed in it, because you're just kind of like just following someone else's expertise. But bit by bit, you start to appreciate, man, that makes sense, of course, right? Like you ask me, why would I need to learn how to grapple in MMA? You say, well, it makes sense, right? You're going to be on the floor at some time. You're going to, you see in boxing matches, right? They always get intertwined. What's going to happen then, right? You need to be able to wrestle. And at the same time, you need to be able to punch. And you need to be able to kick. You need to be able to knee and how to elbow. All of these things are going to happen, right? You can't just, right? So I can see the MMA fight and I can appreciate certain things already. It's not pure taqleed on all levels, but it is, let's say, 20% taqleed, and then 20, then 20% fiqh. I understand what's going on, and 80% taqleed, and it reduces bit by bit as you get closer and closer. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right? And then you have like the muhaqqiq, right? So then this person did takhrij of this mas'ala onto this mas'ala, right? Here you have somebody like, al-Bahuti, for example. You say, is he a mujtahid mutlaq? No, he's not mujtahid mutlaq, but he's doing tarjih in a mas'ala. That's ijtihad as well, on a level. Or he's doing, tafri', right? The mutaakhirin said this, so therefore this, right? So there's also levels of ijtihad, right? This is also fiqh at some level, right? Okay, so it says كالعلم بأن النية في الوضوء واجبة وأن الوتر مندوب، وهذا على مذهب الشافعي، وأما عند المالكية فالسنة مؤكدة، وأن تبييت النية شرط في الصوم، وأن الزكاة واجب في مال الصبي وغير واجبة في الحلي المباح، وأن القتل بمثقل يوجب القصاص، ونحو ذلك من المسائل الخلافية. Right? بخلاف ما ليس طريقه الاجتهاد، ليس طريقه الاجتهاد، كالعلم بأن الصلوات الخمس واجبة، وأن الزنا محرم، وأن الأحكام الاعتقادية كالعلم بالله سبحانه وتعالى وصفاته، ونحو ذلك من المسائل القطعية، فلا يسمى معرفة ذلك فقها لأن معرفة ذلك يشترك فيها الخاص والعام. Right, make sense؟ فالفقه بهذا التعريف لا يتناول إلا علم المجتهد ولا يضر في ذلك ولا يضر في ذلك عدم اختصاص الوقف على الفقهاء بالمجتهدين لأن المرجع في ذلك للعرف وهذا اصطلاح خاص. Go ahead, Mizan.
In this context, what does it mean by لأن معرفة ذلك يشترك فيها الخاص والعام?
Because knowing these things, like, is it called ijtihad to know that Allah exists or that zina is haram? It's not called
No,
ijtihad, right?
no.
Because everybody, that's something that I can do and you can do. The mujtahid and the non-mujtahid, right? والمراد بالمعرفة هنا العلم, he says بمعنى الظن, right? And he puts in the footnotes here. So he says, what is done? تجويز أمرين. I accept that both are possible. لأحدهما, there's jawaz for both. لأحدهما مزيء الآخر, but one is more likely than the other. A, إذعان نفس المجوز بوقوع أحد الأمرين بعينه دون الآخر, that you submit and you accept that one is more likely than the other. Right? So انظر أحكام الفصول معجم تعريفات التعارف right? So then he's saying this is what we mean here. So this is the position of the majority of scholars that they say the ilm means dhan. وأطلقت المعرفة التي هي بمعنى العلم على الظن لأن المراد بذا ظن المجتهد الذي هو لقوته قريب من العلم. Notice he says here, he says قال ابن فركاح, I think his name, حقق بعضهم هذا الجواب فقال المجتهد يعلم بدليل قطعي أن خبر واحد في ذلك الحكم إذا صح إسناده وجب العمل به. Right? So let's take that example. I know that a Sahih hadith is a dalil dhanni, and I know that I have to act upon that dalil, so therefore I know I have to act upon it. So whether it's true or not is irrelevant. Right? It's totally irrelevant whether it's actually true or not. Right? Just like the Qadi who says, the Qadi, you're about to have somebody executed. Why are you going to have him executed? Oh, because four upright witnesses said that he committed zina with all the conditions fulfilled. So now you ask the Qadi, do you know that he committed zina or do you think he committed zina? Says, I think he committed zina. I don't know that, do I? They all could be lying. Right? The Qadi knows that he's obliged to do that, irrespective of the reality of the situation. Right? And he says, ومثل هذا يقال في القياس الجلي إذا نظر في أحد الصور وغلب على ظنه صحة الخبر وتحقق القياس حكم ذلك. فالمظنون حكم هذه الصور خاصة والمقطوع بها القاعدة الكلية المأخوذ بها ذلك الحكم الخاص. Right? So basically this is Ibn Firkah, I think his name is with the Kasra. It's the same argument basically as al-Bidawi. Right? says وخرج بأحكام الشرعية الأحكام العقلية كالعلم بأن الواحد نصف الاثنين والحسية كالعلم بأن النار محرقة. Right? So we call الأحكام العقلية or الأحكام العادية. Right? We're not talking about that. والمراد بالأحكام في قوله معرفة أحكام الشرعية جمع الأحكام فالألف واللام فيها للاستغراق all. Right? والمراد بمعرفة جميع ذلك التهيؤ لذلك, the ability to do that, not that you actually do it, right? So you have the ability to do it, not that you actually do it. التهيؤ فلا ينافي قول مالك رحمه الله وهو من أعظم الفقهاء المجتهدين في 32 مسألة من 48 مسألة سئل عنها لا أدري. Right? So he said about 32 scenarios of what is it? 48. So 48 questions were put to him, and 2/3 of them he said, I don't know. لأنه متهيئ للعلم بأحكامها بمعاودة النظر وإطلاق العلم على مثل هذا التهيؤ شائع عرفا. Right? The faculty, the ability, the ملكة. فلان يعلم النحو ولا تريد أن جميع مسائل حاضرة عنده على التفصيل بل إنه متهيئ لذلك. Right? He has the ability to do that. He says وأقسام الحكم الشرعي ثم بين الأحكام المرادة في قوله الأحكام الشرعية فقال والأحكام سبعة. Right? So now we're going to break them into two categories. When you say حكم شرعي, we are saying things that are moral things. أحكام شرعية تكليفية. These are moral issues. And then أحكام شرعية وضعية, signposts. Right? So when the sun sets, it's Maghrib time. That's a حكم شرعي وضعي. That's not a حكم شرعي تكليفي. Like, what am I supposed to do about that? So here's this woman, she's menstruating and the sun sets. She's like, oh, it's obligatory. So what is she asked to do? She's go, oh, you're obliged to command your children to pray. Okay, I don't have any children. Okay, you're obliged to command people to pray. There's nobody in the world. It's just me. So what's the حكم شرعي then? Nothing. Right? She's not obliged. حكم شرعي تكليفي. She's not being asked to do anything. Right? She's not being asked to do anything. It's just a حكم. Right? Is passing wind good or bad? Say, well, it's just a sign that you have to make wudu. That's all. Or that your prayer is broken. Right? It's not good or bad. Right? The man died. Is that good or bad? It's not good or bad. It's just a sign. Right? And then we could look at sometimes an action from two points of view, right? So killing somebody is haram. Killing somebody is also a sign that the person has a right to qisas, right? A man touches his wife. That's a hukam. It could be wajib, it could be sunnah, it could be haram, right? And in itself as a hukam shara'i, but it's a sign that his wudu is broken, for example, according to some scholars, right? So wal-hakam sab'a al-wajib, Allah, you have to do this. Mandub, you should do this. Mubah, mahdhur, wal-makruh, forbidden and offensive. And then was-sahih wal-batil, right? Valid and invalid. So the prayer is valid, meaning it doesn't have to be done again, right? According to some. Batil, it has to be done again, right? In reality, there's a difference of that, right? So that's a signpost. The contract valid. So the marriage contract is valid. It is halal for you to touch this woman. The marriage contract is not valid. It's not halal to do that. So these are ahkam wada'iyya, right? كون الشيء شرطا لكذا. Something being a condition for something else is a hukam شرعي وضعي, not hukam شرعي تكليفي. Okay? So فالفقه هو علم بهذه السبعة أي معرفة جزئياتها, knowing the specifics, أي الواجبات والمندوبات والمباحات والمحظورات والمكروهات والأفعال الصحيحة والأفعال الباطلة. كالعلم بأن هذا الفعل مثلا واجب وهذا مندوب وهذا مباح وهذا محظور وهذا مكروه وهذا صحيح وهذا باطل. وليس المراد بتعريفات هذه الأحكام المذكورة فإن ذلك من علم أصول الفقه. Knowing what it means for something to be valid as a concept. We don't mean that. وإطلاق الأحكام على هذه الأمور فيه تجوز لأنها متعلق الأحكام. والأحكام الشرعية الإيجاب, Allah making something obligatory for you. الندب, Allah encouraging you to do something. Al-ibaha, Allah allowing you to do something. Al-karaha, Allah telling you that He doesn't want you to do that thing, but He's not threatening you with punishment. Wa-tahrim, Allah making that haram to you. Okay? Make sense?
Yes.
Okie dokie. So he says, وجعله الأحكام السبع اصطلاحا له والذي عليه الجمهور أن الأحكام خمسة لا سبعة كما ذكرناها لأن الصحيح إما واجب أو غيره والباطل داخل في المحظور. Right? And so, anyway, these are just different ways of organizing it. Right? So basically he's saying these are ahkam. These are ahkam wada'iyya, so don't put them under ahkam taklifiyya, right? He says وجعل بعضهم الأحكام 9 وزاد الرخصة والعزيمة وهما راجعان إلى الأحكام الخمسة أيضا والله أعلم. Okay, so now we're going to have a discussion. So this is again this whole concept, right? So you're talking to a what's it called, a communist, and you say, hey, can you pass me my wallet? And he's like, what do you mean? Like, can you pass me my wallet? He said, what do you mean by my wallet? So the wallet that belongs to me. So what do you mean by belongs? Like, bro, like belongs to me. It's like, what do you mean by belongs? So it's my property. What do you mean by property? Like, oh my God, this is a stupid discussion. So for you and I, right? Did anybody grow up here in communist Russia or the east side of Germany? Right? No? So for you and I, we are Muslims and we grew up in countries that we believe in private ownership. So that's something that it's axiomatic, it's obvious, right? It's obvious that it exists. So here's a problem though. A lot of things are not, you think that are axiomatic, they are obvious, they are unquestionable, they are questionable, right? So I come along and say, oh, the hadith says this, therefore it's obligatory. And you say, what do you mean by obligatory? Is there a difference between recommended and obligatory? And say, yeah, what's the dalil for that? So one of the many dhanni things is you're going to come to the Quran and Sunnah and put them into categories of halal and this and this. Where did you get those ideas from to begin with? So he's thinking that that's obvious and is unquestionable. It's not. So the categories that we are going to put revelation into is made up by us. We made it. We invented the definition of Sahih Hadith. We invented the idea of this or the idea of that, and we invented categories to put Allah's commands into. It's all human creation. I'm not saying that to question it. I'm just saying that it's not qata'i. So again, the person who doesn't see how difficult ijtihad is, they don't know all the processes involved. They don't. Right? And I think a good example of ijtihad is playing a musical instrument, right? So you have a friend, he can play on the piano, he can go, can you do this song? What's it, some kind of song on the piano? He's like, yeah, you press this key, press this key, press this, right? So now you say, I want you to do ijtihad, I want you to play a tune without a musical instrument, without notes or anything. So let's look at fiqh as compared to playing a musical instrument. I ask Muhammad Amin a question. I say, is it halal in the Hanbali school to do this? He has set books, set prints, set reference chapters. They're built on this and this and this and this and this. It's very much like somebody buying a piano and saying, can I play this tune? Right? But notice the piano has already given you the division of where the notes are. So you already know what to press. Right? You don't have to figure out where to press it. The parts are already available. You break this key and go and buy it. The concept of the piano exists here and it's there. The lessons, how to play, I don't know, some tune, you go on YouTube and right? I'm not trying to say people should play a piano, right? Well, I'm just giving an example. But you see, the whole thing is totally set up. But could you do this from scratch? Invent music and invent tunes and invent all the parts of that piano and all the notes and all these things by yourself. It's super hard. And it's not. And then you go and find out, oh, look, in India, right? Indian, they have funny music. Did you know why? Because the gaps between their notes are not the same. The gaps between the notes are not the same as in Western music, right? It's not the same. So you think everything is very simple. The hadith is sahih, Prophet ﷺ said, you cannot sell a cat, therefore it is haram to sell a cat. Okay, but what if I did it? Is it so simple to jump from it's haram to sell a cat that it's invalid? Is that true? Or did you invent that parrot? Does it say that in the Quran that if you do something that's haram, it doesn't count? Is that always the case? Like, or did we invent that idea? Then the relationship between prohibition and validity, or the concept of validity, or the concept of prohibition, did you invent it or did the Quran invent it? In reality, you invented it. These are our own processes, our own systems that we created, our own deficient human processes. So it makes all of these things problematic, right? It makes the whole process of transferring revelation into ahkam shar'iyya is dhanni, because the slots that you're putting to are your own creation. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Is everyone following?
Yes.
All right. So in my mind, as somebody who grows up in the West, I'm like, yeah, a tune is like this. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, da, 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 da. You can listen to my notes, and my notes will fit into Western tunes. But I just think it's just how it is, you know? Like you're going to have an A or an A flat or an A sharp. That's just how it is. And you go to India, it's something else. You go to somewhere in Africa, it's somewhere else, like, whoa, what happened? Suddenly I realize it's not so simple. It's not so, right? Making then this machine that will make these sounds is not so easy. It's very complex, right? And then even look at, for example, people do ijtihad, right? Again, I'm talking about music, but should do music. Just an example. Do you think you can be Beethoven if you've never done a music lesson? If you've never done taqleed, do you think you could make up your own tunes that are like amazing? You just walk into the room and just like playing something. Is that possible? It's not possible.
Of course not. No.
Right? It's ridiculous, right? That's ridiculous. So so all of these things are hugely complex, and the only way you can do it is through talaqqi and tafaqquh. And you're like, yeah, and then you see these things and see these things, right? That's how it is, right? It's a very complex system. Okay, khair. So we've invented this thing called al-wajib, i.e., we believe that Allah has told us to do certain things and not given us an option not to do it. And on top of that, he has made us obliged to do that. He has made us, threatened us with hellfire. So these are two separate things. One, I'm telling you to do something, and I'm not giving you the option not to do it. And two, I'm telling you to do something, and I'm threatening you with hellfire. Now, these are in reality two separate things. They are two separate things. Okay? One is a moral issue. Your creator has told you to do something, and he's not giving you an option not to do it. That's a moral issue. The other one is an eschatological issue. Eschatology meaning what will happen in the next life. Right? One is to do with the reality of it, the moral reality of it. The other is to do with its repercussions. They're not related. Well, they are related, but they're not the same thing. Okay? So that's important because you say, what's the difference between makruh and haram? So is the difference between makruh and haram that you can do the opposite? Or is the difference that there's a punishment or not? Well, certainly there's a difference between haram and makruh tanzihi, right? And makruh tanzihan, when you say Allah is not threatening you with a punishment. But are you saying then that makruh is a qism min aqsam al-mubah? Right? So there's mahdhur, you can't do it. And then there's ghayr mahdhur, you can do it. And under ghayr mahdhur, you can do it. There is makruh, mubah, mandub, and wajib. Right? Where do you put it? Again, we are going to try and put it in different places, and there'll be repercussions in where you put it. Does that make sense? So it's quite a complex process of how we organize these things, right? So he says ثم شرع في تعريف الأحكام التي ذكرها بذكر لازم كل منها فقال فالواجب ما يثاب على فعله. Notice بذكر لازم. It's the لازم. That's not its حقيقة. والواجب ما يثاب على فعله ويعاقب على تركه. But what is it من حيث هو? What is it in terms of itself? Right? So he says أي فالواجب من حيث وصفه بالوجوب هو ما يثاب على فعله ويعاقب على تركه. Really? Right? Notice it says والواجب لغة الساقط الثابت اللازم. Right? فإذا وجبت جنوبها أي سقطت. There's no way out. واجب البيع ثبت لزم. Right? Notice here الباقلاني says الأولى في حده أن يقال هو الذي يذم تاركه ويلام شرعا بوجه ما. Right? وإلى نحو هذا ذهب الغزالي والبيضاوي والرازي والشوكاني وصديق حسن وصديق خان وغيرهم. وقال أصولي ينقسم الواجب من حيث الفعل إلى معين something else. Right? So notice when you say that when we're saying you عاقب or there's punishment or no punishment, that's not من حيث هو. Right? He says فالتعريف المذكور ليس تعريفا بحقيقة الواجب إذ لا يمكن تعريف حقيقته لكثرة أصناف الواجبات وإنما المقصود بيان الوصف الذي اشتركت فيه حتى صح etc. Okay. So anyway, he's going a lot of tangent here. I don't want to go through all of these things. So he says, على صحة الأذان. Okay. So he's going to a lot of things here. What I'm trying to say is there's the difference between eschatological repercussions. What has Allah told us He will do versus what is it? Okay? What is it? Okay? These are two separate things. Okay? Then he's going to go into ta'rif and mandub, inshallah. Okay? So think about these things. How should we organize these things? Do we talk about things as you can and you can't? Is it category number one haram and then everything else is under wajib? Or is it wajib is number one and everything else is غير wajib, like ma'mur bihi, and everything is غير ma'mur bihi? Right? How do you organize it? Try and think of other ways you could organize it. Right? Try and think of different ways you could do it. Right? We're going to see the Hanafis, for example. We're going to mention this inshallah with the wajib and the fard. So in fact, we'll go into this, right? What's the difference between wajib and fard in the Hanbali school, in prayer, in wudu? Right? Is that a ta'rif haqiqi or is that a ta'rif wada'i? Like, is it actually a difference, or is that a difference vis-a-vis its repercussions? Right? Or vis-a-vis its dalil? Right? Does that make sense? So the Hanafis, wajib and fard, they're going to distinguish it in terms of its repercussions in the prayer, right? In tawaf, right? And vis-a-vis its dalil. But is that in reality a difference or not? Or is that something secondary? Right? The Shafis, for example, we difference between wajib and fard in Hajj. Say this is wajib and this is fard. But is that a real difference? Or is that a useful difference that means vis-a-vis its repercussions? Does that make sense? Go ahead, Mizan.
The author mentions 7 ahkam al-Sharia, right, in the book. So he mentions Sahih and Batil. So Sahih and Batil, we can't really tell, right, if he is including an ahkam wad'iyya or ahkam al-taklifiyya. Could it be either one?
So he that's the point he made. He said that it goes back to 5 because you can kind of put, in a certain way, you can kind of put Sahih and Batil as a repercussion of wajib or repercussion of prohibited or something like that, right? But in reality, you can break them down to many more, right? So in terms of the terms that we use in fiqh, we use tons of terms, right? As a Hanafi, right? You're going to say things like sunnah mu'akkada aqrab ila wajib,
Yeah.
right? Like what's that, right? So, but the issue is, what are these in reality separate categories, or the separate ways that certain thing behave even under one category,
Would it
right?
be better to put it in ahkam al-taklifi or ahkam wadiyah? Which one?
It would be, yeah. That would be nicer to do that. Ahkam. So one thing, so then you can talk about shart, right? Shart, mubtil, right? So you say, does the nawaqid of wudu, like this breaks wudu. That's hukm shar'i wada'i, right? So be like, Ahmed walks out of the house and touches, holds hands with this woman who's not married to. What in terms of taklifi, haram. In terms of wada'i, does it break wudu? Does it not break wudu, etc. Right? So it would be better to do that, yes. Right? But anyway, we don't have time. We're going to stop here. But let's think about next week. Sunnah mu'akkada, isn't that wajib in some point of view? For some school, in some schools. What about the difference between wajib and fard? Right? And we'll talk about inshallah these things. We'll come back to wajib inshallah next week. Inshallah wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi sallam. My point that I'm trying to make is we invented these categories. So therefore they are the whole process of ijtihad is ijtihadi. It is dhanni to begin with. Because you created slots and then you decided where to put things in. Your process of what is a dalil and what is a non-dalil is dhanni. The categories you're going to put them into is dhanni. Of course, the whole process is dhanni. Right? The whole process is dhanni. And how is that useful? Not to say, hey, we don't know what's going on, is to say, no, it's very complex. Right? And this is the most important thing to understand is that somebody going into something and thinking that it's simple. It's not like that. You go into something and you realize how complex it is, like, oh, I see. This is a complex system. I need to take my time as opposed to jump to conclusions. Right? Inshallah, I'll stop here. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi sallam. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.